Are you a high-achieving professional BIPOC woman who is ready to claim your worth outside of the hustle? Are you ready to experience joy, peace, and contentment as you make an impact on the world without overextending yourself? Are you longing for a space that centers the experiences of women of color, where you can practice leaning into the soft life without being expected to explain yourself or be responsible for other people? If you answered yes to these questions, I invite you to apply to join the Unconditionally Worthy group coaching program. Here's what one of my former group coaching members, Felicia, had to say about how the program helped her.
The program has encouraged me to put myself first and to actually think about what I wanted. That was another thing that came up for me. A lot of the times with the prompts and the modules, like, I don't know, because I never stopped to think about it. No one's ever asked me what I thought or what I felt about these particular scenarios. And that's been fun, just discovering myself. Because, it's like I originally started this program or with the thought and the intention to get back to myself. And the reality is there was nothing to get back to because I never explored it. I don't know. So now it's just getting curious about, well, what do I like? What do I want? How does this feel? And that's been incredibly helpful. And I'm excited for this new adventure to get to know myself.
The next cohort starts the week of September 25th, 2023. Apply now before spots fill up. I will personally review your application and invite you to join me for a call to discuss whether or not this program is right for you.
I help them to see the thing that's always been there, reconnect with it, communicate it powerfully so that they can start showing up, doing the thing they were put on earth to do.
Welcome to the Unconditionally Worthy Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Adia Gooden, a licensed clinical psychologist who believes deeply that you are worthy unconditionally. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Unconditionally Worthy Podcast. I really love this episode. I love the experience of talking to the guest. Her name is Amanda Miller Littlejohn. She is a journalist. She is a coach. She is a personal branding expert. And we really have a rich conversation about getting out of hustle and grind culture, about imagining possibilities for our lives, for our children's lives, about self-erasure and how we can start seeing ourselves. It is such a good conversation. I enjoyed having it, and I really believe that you're going to enjoy listening to it. So be sure to tune in. And as always, let us know what you think. I'd sincerely appreciate if you would share the episode with anyone who you think would benefit. And if you'd leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, that does so much to get more people listening to the podcast. So thanks so much for that in advance. And let's get into the show. I'm excited to welcome Amanda Miller Littlejohn onto the podcast. With a career spanning 15 years across journalism, public relations, and coaching, Amanda has been a pioneering voice on personal branding, teaching her students and clients across the globe to package their genius ideas, strategies, and services so they can earn a living from their most impactful work. As the founder of Package Your Genius Academy, she works as an executive coach and executive storyteller, helping brilliant minds of color get their life-changing ideas into the world. Amanda is about helping leaders of color make themselves visible to combat erasure. A lifelong writer, Amanda is a contributing columnist, capturing the zeitgeist through her timely essays on work, rest, and Black women. Her writing has been published in the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, and Los Angeles Times. And I am so excited to welcome Amanda to the podcast. We actually initially connected because she wrote a piece in the LA Times that I really resonated with. And I think I shared it. And then somehow we got into the DMs, started messaging. And then we're trying to connect and the timing didn't work. And then we ran into each other in Puerto Rico very randomly. And then now we are finally here, and she is here to share her wisdom and her insight in the podcast. So thank you so much for being here, Amanda.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited we could finally make this happen.
Yes, yes. Navigating busy schedules and moving around is sometimes a challenge, but we made it.
We made it. We did it, Joe.
We did it. There we go. So I'd love to start our conversation where I start all my conversations with guests on the podcast, which is asking you to share a bit about your own self-worth journey.
That's a great question. So my self-worth journey, of course, I believe has been lifelong, but kind of came to a head for me during the pandemic when I was leading a group of women through my personal branding program. It's a cohort curriculum-based program. And all the women in the group were like women of color, high achieving, just hardworking, ambitious, highly effective and accomplished people. And we were working on just like helping them tell their stories more powerfully and claim all of the accolades and respect and recognition that their hard work deserves. And we started having these conversations about how we all have been groomed to work twice as hard for half as much. Like that was the narrative our parents had passed down to us. And we were exhausted. We were utterly exhausted. And that kind of kicked off a season of me that coupled with burnout and coupled with or tripled with me having a daughter, having a baby during the pandemic, having those conversations, experiencing physical and mental and emotional burnout really forced me to come face to face with my own ideas about my identity as a hard worker and whether or not that label, having a work ethic, a great work ethic, if that was a value, which I had always considered it to be a personal value, or was it just the conditioning of, my lived experience?
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think I resonate. I know so many of the listeners will sort of resonate of the pandemic in so many ways being this like wake up call, right? There was so much going on and we were all, or most of us were stuck at home, right? With all this like open space, right? Because you couldn't kind of be as busy in the same ways. Like some of us were very busy still, but you sort of like had to look at what's working, what's not working. Is this something I really still want to do? And so I think a lot of people, it required this look. And I know for me, part of it was like, okay, I left my job. And so it sounds like for you, it's like, am I this hard work thing? Is this something I'm still buying into? And I think, it's very prescribed by culture. And then as you're saying, right, we're socialized into it as Black women, as people of color, right? And there's truth to it, right? We know that we can be criticized and picked at and not appreciated unless, we are at the very top of our game. And yet sometimes trying to adhere to that means that we're not owning our humanity, the fact that we're humans and we need rest and it's okay to make mistakes and all of those things. And so I appreciate you sharing that reflection and then also talking about how having a daughter and kind of thinking about what do I want to pass on to her and how do I want to show up for her brought that out as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it was, you talk about the pandemic being this time where people had a chance to stop. For me, I feel like I went overboard because I already work from home, work virtually, and I've been working that way for years. And so with everyone kind of in that mode, I don't know, like business was doing well. My groups were going well. My corporate work was going well. Then I have this baby. And I realized at a certain point that like I had never truly met my ceiling, like my capacity, right? Because, a lifetime of overachieving, you have a high capacity for hard work, for good work, for doing things faster than other people can, being more productive. And so the pandemic finally gave me a chance where it was like, okay, I'm going to have irons in this fire. I'm doing this, doing this, doing this, doing this. And it was just like, you can't do all of it. Right. And I hit a wall. And when I started to kind of ask myself, and let me just be honest, the only reason I stopped to even consider something different was because my body forced me to, right? My body failed me. I got really, really sick. But I started to think about like, why am I so driven to work this way and work myself to exhaustion, work myself to a point where I am getting sick. And I realized that like I was conflating achievement with my worth. And I was using achievement and had been using achievement since childhood to feel like I was worthy of just taking up space in the world. And so I think that's a story that has resonated with a lot of people too. We absorb so many messages in our culture about our worth as women, as Black women, as brown, darker hued Black women. I mean, there's just so many layers to it. And so, you almost try to create this wall of protection around yourself through your results and your achievement. It finally caught up with me, and I had to peel back those layers.
Yeah, I mean, I relate to that. And I think so many people listening will relate to that, like connecting your worth to productivity. And what just sort of came to me as you were talking is how for Black people specifically, and specifically Black people whose ancestors were enslaved, how there's like a thread of that in slavery, right? Like an enslaved person was worth more if they were more productive and they could work more and produce more. Like those were the metrics upon which our ancestors were measured and valued, right? And then, obviously we're also in a society that says productivity and busyness, but I hadn't totally thought before about the connection and the legacy of slavery that gets brought into hustle and grind culture and how it shows up particularly in Black communities and who's valuable. And so I think just even speaks even more to dismantling that and detaching our worth and the value we can contribute from how much we can work, how hard we can work, how much we can produce. And that doesn't mean that you don't do work, right? It doesn't mean that you don't engage in work and doing it at the expense of our bodies, at the expense of our health without resting, right? We know that that's not sustainable.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's where we are up against a legacy, a legacy of that's been passed down. And I think, you hear about epigenetics and the different things that are literally physically passed through the mother's umbilical cord, and the experiences, the memory, the hormones, all those things, like it goes somewhere. Right? Like it doesn't just get thrown out because we say, okay, we don't believe that anymore. It's still in us. And I think we're at a time where we're searching for and trying to create new models for ourselves and for our children about what it means to be a Black person in this country who is not so defined by their work and by we talk about slavery. And I think, as I mentioned in the Washington Post article that I wrote that was just talking about Black women and exhaustion, in a broader sense, like, yes, Black people in America, descendants of slaves, we do have this very cruel legacy of slavery. But even though the broader culture, I mean, capitalism itself, and slavery was a very cruel instrument of capitalism, but capitalism itself is judging us all based on what we produce. And so, even our white brothers and sisters are dealing with this same idea, this same sense of we have to work, we have to overwork so that we're literally producing to create more value for the companies we work for and their shareholders. And this system that, like, when you really stop to think about it, it's like, what am I building or investing into? Like, what am
Mm,
I putting my energy, my days, my time, my life force into? Like, what is the return?
mm,
What am I contributing to? And I think when you take time to look at that, you can assess how you're using your energy and how you're using your time, and start to think about what could be different and how you
mm,
can move differently, and even what you might need or not need that you thought you did. And it's like, oh, I'm working so
Mm-hmm.
hard for the next. Are we really? Do they really need all that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, these
well,
stories we tell ourselves, like,
mm-hmm,
I have to do that, or, I didn't come for money, so I have to
mm-hmm. Yeah.
just rethink it all.
Right. And I think sort of recognize the legacy of trauma and poverty and all of those things that can get us into a mode of like, I have to do it. But I remember
Mhm.
having a conversation with my good friend, and it was sort of after I had basically decided to leave my last job. So I knew I was on the way out. And she was like, you need to do B work, like B, like the grade, like getting a grade of B level work. And I was just like, mind blown. Like, what? Like,
Mhm.
that's possible. I could
Right.
not go for the A. I could literally just say B work is good enough. It's still passing, right?
Mhm.
It's still, but for someone who
Still
like grew
above
up as
average.
exactly, but someone who grew up as like always do the best, do the most, it was such a shift to be like, yeah, I don't have to go for an A. I actually do not have to. And I could choose, because at that time it was like I was transitioning out of my main job and I was starting, my business to get ready. And it's like I could choose where I put my energy, where I'm investing my time, and I can be okay getting a B, right? So if my supervisor or whoever says, Adia, that wasn't that great, or here's room for improvement, I can be okay with that because I'm choosing how I want to spend my time and energy. And that really was a revelation. And I feel like that's what you're talking about. It's we can get so much into the habit and the mode of I have to, and I don't have a choice, and I've got to keep working and overworking. And the reality is that we do have more choice than we're often aware of. And so it requires us to slow down and pause and ask these questions, which can be scary questions that you're posing, which is, why am I doing this? Do I want to do it? Do I have to do it? Right? What could change? And that really opens up that agency and choice that we have.
I absolutely agree. And I think that even that line of questioning is what prompted me to explore in the LA Times article that you mentioned, because after I started embracing the idea that I needed to really examine this notion of working twice as hard, and my work ethic is my identity, and I'm known for the results I can deliver, and how productive I can be. When I started to unpack that and shift how I even talked to myself, like my
Mm,
self talk, how I took care of myself, how I prioritized myself, how I allowed myself the margin to, do what makes me happy, the simple things, the free things, like have enjoy my cup of coffee in the morning, write in my journal, take
mm,
a delicious walk through the forest, sit
mm,
outside and feel the sun on my face. Like, I don't have to be rushing and filling every moment with productivity to feel accomplished at the end of the day. When I started examining that and changing my approach to just like how I treated myself, it forced me to look at how I was treating my kids and the
mm,
messages that I was passing down to them. It literally made me rethink my entire approach to
mm,
parenting, because up to that point, I had truly believed that, your work ethic, what you produce, what you can show you've done so that people understand your value in this world and opportunities are available to you. You have to do this in order to get opportunities. And it was the pandemic, so the kids are at home,
Mm.
and they watched me burn out. And, because they were at home doing virtual school, it was really powerful to have them mirror back to me my own insanity. Like,
Mm.
I had the baby, and then I'm literally like, it's just, I didn't take a maternity leave. Like, it was crazy. And they were just like, I remember we called my daughter Bean. And my son said, he was like, Mommy, why do you have to like just keep working? I think you should just take a break right now and be with Bean. Bean needs you.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure your heart was like, oh,
Like, you're right. And my kids are great for that. Like, they will check me and tell me the truth. But I lost sight of what was most important. Like, what is the thing that only I can do in this world? I'm the only person who can mother this child, and build the bond of her birth mother. Like, what am I doing? Like, all this other stuff will be here. And so it made me think about just the messages that I was passing down to the kids. And we've talked about it. We've talked about like prioritizing yourself and rest. And I even started to say, listen, okay, I love A's. A's are great. But if getting a B means you get a good night of sleep, and you feel better in your body, and you've got time to do some of the things that you like to do in addition to school, I'm okay with that. And I think that was revolutionary for me.
I mean, that's huge. And I think, what comes up for me is I'm not there. I have a 12-month-old, so we're not school age yet, and we'll see kind of how it plays out. But what comes up for me is like the need to manage my anxiety that if my daughter doesn't get the best grades, that she'll be okay. Right? Because we have been told that if you get the best grades, you get into the best schools, and you're going to get the best jobs, and that's safety and security. And I think we know to a certain extent that that's not true. To some extent, it can be true, right? But then we also know the unhelpful consequences of overworking, kids burning themselves out. And when we see the stories in the very extreme of these kids at super competitive high schools dying by suicide because there's so much pressure to get into the right school and they haven't done it, right? And so I think we know that, and the desire for your kid to have every opportunity and to have every chance, and to know like having a Black child and them maybe not having all A's or the best grades means like some opportunities may not be, like, I just imagine there's a lot of like self-soothing and anxiety management that comes with giving your children the space, or giving our children the space to be kids and to get it right sometimes and get the grades sometimes, and other times need to learn how to prioritize themselves, right? And like just navigating that uncertainty and that kind of wide open field in that way.
And I think, yes, all the things. And it's like, it's not a thing you just up and say, I have changed my philosophy and now things are this way. You have to, I mean, it's a practice, because I have spent my entire life believing that hard work was the key to everything. And in some contexts it is. But when you talk about us wanting to give our kids every advantage and position them so that they are able to get the most and get the best jobs and have the best life. And that's what I'm talking about. This whole like narrative that we start to tell ourselves about, like, well, I'm working so hard so I can give this to you, and you have to work so hard so you can have that. And it's like, really examine, what does that mean? What is a great life? What is the best job? Like, what am I pushing you towards? What am I assuming that you want? What am I assuming that will be the pathway to your success? Like, the way I earn money was not even available when I was, you know what I mean? When I was in middle school, like selling coaching and strategy on the internet. Like, so who's to say, right? Like,
That
who's to
there's
say
some,
what the world will be
yeah.
and how they'll be able to um fulfill their dreams and even outside of that, just this notion that more money,
Mm.
or this, or that is the key to happiness when I just told you.
Mm.
Drinking my cup of coffee, writing in my journal,
Mhm. Mhm.
sitting outside with the sun on my face.
Mhm.
That's happiness to me. And so even just like trying to reprogram myself around what I am saying is required
Yeah.
for my children to be happy, right? Like,
Yeah.
and me even encouraging, like, what am I encouraging? I'm over indexing on achievement so that you can make money, but that's
Mm.
literally like just one part of life. And my kids are smart. They're very talented. They're creative. They're going to be able to make money, right? Like
Mhm.
they're not
Mhm.
idiots and they have skills. They have gifts. They will be able to make money. So maybe I should be encouraging, this is how you take care of yourself. This is how you take care of your relationships. This is how you build your
Mm.
networks. Those are the things that are going to contribute to your overall fulfillment.
Are you a high achieving professional BIPOC woman who has achieved success through hard work and hustle? You've shown up, busted barriers, and challenged low expectations. And now you're tired. You're ready for a space where you will be encouraged, supported, and where your soul will be nourished. I created the Unconditionally Worthy group coaching program for you. This program offers the space you are looking for. In this curated group of just 10 BIPOC women, I will coach and guide you to embrace your unconditional self-worth. This curriculum-based group coaching program is grounded in my 15 years of experience as a clinical psychologist, my research and expertise from writing and publishing a book on Black women's mental health, and my own journey of overcoming perfectionism, overworking, and people-pleasing to embrace and live from the truth that I am unconditionally worthy. Here's what one of my former group coaching members, Tony, had to say about the program.
To me, it's the best investment one can make in themselves. So do it. Don't let finances hamper you because we spend money anyway. It's the best investment in yourself.
Apply now before spots fill up. The next cohort starts the week of September 25th, 2023. I will personally review your application and invite you to join me for a call to discuss whether this program is right for you. I love that. I love that. It's like, it is a reprogramming, as you're saying, and it is a really thinking deeply about what are our values? What is it actually that we want for our kids versus just passing down or adopting societal narratives about what needs to happen. And I also think about helping them to sort of what you're describing, like be good humans, right? Like have healthy relationships, be able to take care of themselves, be able to show up and follow through on commitments, right? Like that's an important thing to do as a human, right? But that it's not like all work at the expense of, right? Like just to get into the best school, the best whatever, the best, and it's like, well, will that make them happy? Is it the best fit, right? Is it the right fit? Does it nurture them? Does it, help them to be creative and the way they want to be creative? So I love all of these questions that you're asking, which require us to really look at what are we doing and also what are we modeling, right? Because I think often as parents, it can be like, okay, I've had questions of like, well, how do I help my child know that they're worthy? And of course, there are things that you can do, say, not say, etc. And the way we model owning our worthiness, whether things are going well or not going well in our own lives, right? The way we claim the truth of who we are, like that modeling is one of the most powerful things that we can offer to our children.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to shift to talk about how this also relates to the work that you do with women and people, who are packaging, you talk about packaging their genius, and women of color packaging their genius. And I'm curious about kind of the intersections between helping women to own their gifts, own their strengths, own their insights, and also pulling away from this overworking, overproduction, maybe even trying to be like everyone else kind of culture. And so I'd love for you to kind of talk about what that looks like.
Well, it's interesting. So I guess technically you would call me like a personal branding or visibility coach. And I have a whole framework of like how I guide people to find the essence of their brand, which essentially is just helping you reconnect with who you've always been and helping you strengthen the muscle of self-discovery and like self-communion. I do this regularly and have been doing it since I was 10 years old or so. Like I've just always been a thinker or a writer, and I just like question and record my day and think about this and what about that. But my process is really meant to help each of my clients get back in touch with the thing that energizes them and that comes so effortlessly and easily to them, and that they love to do. And so I think when you talk about intersections, when you can really hone in on the thing that just brings you joy, but it's almost like it's a natural, innate thing that you've always been doing, it actually requires less work and delivers and creates better results. And so I'm all about helping people find that intersection of like my skills, my passion, my energy, and also this thing that I've probably been dismissing, taking for granted, downplaying, because it is so easy for me. It's so just naturally who I am. So I'm not giving it the credit it deserves. I'm not talking about it as powerfully as I should. I'm not owning the value of it and claiming the power of this thing that I do. And so I help them to see the thing that's always been there, reconnect with it, communicate it powerfully so that they can start showing up, doing the thing they were put on earth to do. And therefore, they don't have to work so hard to be worthy.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that often when we are sharing those gifts that we are designed to share, it is more about being, right, than the doing and the working and the grinding, right? It is like that person who shows up and has that magnetic energy, or like you're saying, like this curiosity, this asking questions, this reflection that inspires other people to reflect and think. And so I do think that's so powerful to help people recognize that as sort of this gift and this strength, this genius. And I was also sort of connecting this back to our conversation about productivity in our culture. And it made me wonder if part of the reason so many of us have trouble owning our genius, are the things that come naturally, is because they aren't in that framework of working hard, right? And we are in a culture that values hard work and grinding, and that's what you are proud of. And so the things that come with ease, with joy, with fun, with creativity that just flow, we're like, well, that's nothing, right? Because it's a different framework, and it often isn't a tangible product that comes through. So I wonder if you've thought at all about that, the fact that we often do have challenges owning that part of us that comes through naturally. And, whether that is in part because we're so used to this framework of it's valuable if it takes hard work and it involves a grind. And that's what makes something, of value or worthy.
Absolutely. And I've even had cases in my own life where I was developing something or creating something and, got great at it or had so much practice with it that it was so easy that I started to be like, is this even valuable to the world? Because it's just, it's too easy. And then I start breaking things so I can make it hard again. And then I'm like, wait, what? What am I doing? But I think it kind of goes back to what we affirm and what we do not affirm in our children and young people. You think about education, there's just such a missed opportunity when we look at children, because in childhood, that's when we are closest to the purpose of our lives, because we don't. I wrote in this poem once, like young people just aren't cunning enough to forge, right? Like you cannot fake, who you are and what you like. You ever ask a child a question? Do you like my outfit? Does this dress make me look fat? Like, they will tell you the truth. And I think that honesty is something that work to harness with children to help them remember who they are, because as they get older, and by design, I think that like our society forces them to forget. And so I think it goes back to that. It goes back to, we don't really affirm our young people for the things that come easily to them. We don't channel the things that are disruptive to us or inconvenient to us into things that, talkativeness, right? That can be channeled. Physical activity, hyperactivity, that can be channeled. Like so much is posed as a disruption. And that, I think, goes back to just like our modern society and the 5-day work week modeled after factories. And like, we're just trying to create these uniform people who follow rules and orders. But at the end of the day, that does not bode well for people seeing their individuality. Like it's completely counter to our modern work society.
Yeah. And it's like, where's the space for that play and what children are drawn to stay in this fun and light place? Because I even think about, as kids go into activities, it's like becomes very serious and very competitive. And not that there's a problem with like sports and competition, because that can create discipline and all of the, right, like skill and all of these things. But it feels like things get serious younger and younger. Right. And it's like, okay, so you play basketball, you're going to make it to the NBA, the WNBA, right? Like it just becomes intense. And it's like, what maybe once was like, oh, this is fun and shooting hoops and like all this stuff becomes like serious. And already at 10, you're preparing for what you're going to do at 20. And it's like, where is the room for the lightness and the freedom and the play? And are there parts of that, even as we sort of need to structure some things, that we can leave room for that lightness and that creativity and that play and that fun, so that it's not lost in the process?
Yeah, I think you said you touched on it perfectly when you mentioned like, okay, I'm playing basketball and I love it. Well, wait, you're going to get on this team and you're going to do this so you can eventually get to the NBA. I think it's that injection of the capitalism that takes, you know what I mean? Like instead of just allowing it to be something I pursue because I enjoy it and I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know, but I enjoy it. So I'm going to keep doing it. It's like we force ourselves to see how will this fit into capitalism. And I think for a lot of people, self included, if we don't see a clear pathway to capitalism, we don't pursue the things that we want to pursue. So, I remember when I was in high school, I was a poet. I wrote all these poems. Everybody in my school was like, oh my God, one day we're going to read your poems. We're going to go get your books and, buy them from Davis Kid Booksellers. That was like the big bookstore in Nashville. And I remember talking to my dad about like college, and I said, yeah, I'm going to major in English. And he was just like, why? Like, you're going to be the most well-spoken person working at McDonald's. Like, he said that. And I was like, okay, that's mean. But like that notion of you're creative, you're a writer, you want to pursue literature, and you're not necessarily sure where it all is going to lead, but this is what you're passionate about. It planted the seed in me that like you cannot earn a good living and make a good life for yourself through your creative talents. And it's taken me my entire life to dismantle that, and I'm still dismantling it. But it's simply not true. And I can even think of decisions that I made and kind of like we're in the path diverged in the past, and I said, okay, I can't follow that path because there's not enough money there, right? But like I remember Ta-Nehisi Coates said it so beautifully when he was talking about writers and like, you know, the writers that make it. And he said that the game of writing, like the whole goal of it is just to stay in the game. He's like, because people are just every year, people are going to just drop out. And so like, if you get to 40 and you're still writing, you win because no one else is there. And it's like, if you've been writing every day, every week, every month, every year, and this is what you do, and you've been doing this for 20 years, you win because there's a pool of like 3 people. There's like nobody left. And so it's just, I don't know. I think of these things and I don't regret anything. I love my work. And as you can see, like, I mean, we're connecting because I'm following the call of sharing my voice in a different way, like through the essays, the op-eds and the creative stuff, right? That brought us to this table, right? And so I think that's a part of my reframe, my seeing myself, right? Like giving myself permission to explore something that it doesn't have to pay the kids' tuition. It doesn't have to pay the mortgage. And just because it doesn't mean it doesn't deserve to exist. And if it makes me happy, is that not enough payment? Like allowing myself to carve out time to pursue something that's meaningful to me. And I mean, to be honest with you, even though I say, okay, like the writing doesn't really pay, when you publish something, you do get a small fee, but it's nothing, you know, for my lifestyle. I cannot support my household on that. But other opportunities, doors that have been opened, speaking engagements, paid speaking, like all sorts of things come out of that. And so I think it's worth allowing yourself the permission to explore, and like not attaching the responsibility of capitalism to something that is a calling, right? A calling of your heart. Like,
right.
Give
the pressures
permission
of
to
it.
see where it goes. Just try it. You never know.
I love that. I love that. You're making me think. So I was planning to sort of ask you, and I still want to ask you about sort of combating erasure of Black leaders. But as you were talking, it brought me to this question of self-erasure. And one of the things you said is, I see myself, and can I see myself? And it feels like there is erasure of Black and brown and, you know, BIPOC leaders, certainly in the world. And I think what we're talking about is being socialized into self-erasure, right? And not seeing our needs, our wants, our desires. So I'd love for you to maybe start this question from the inside out, right? Like how do we maybe erase ourselves that keeps us disconnected from our gifts and our genius? And then how does that relate to the problems of us being erased in the world?
So many things. That's a yummy question. I think, again, going back to what we affirm in children and what we don't affirm, and who are some of those influential voices of childhood who plant messages unknowingly that haunt us for decades. It's really, and that's another thing I'm obsessed with, like watching people who have kind of known and followed and harnessed their magic from childhood. What was different about them? And a lot of times you'll find that they had very supportive parental figures. Like you look at Beyonce, for example, she's mentioned in interviews that, she wouldn't be able to do what she does if her mother had not invested time, resources, costumes, hair, touring, like that requires being seen, being validated, being taken seriously, being encouraged, and also being parented and mothered in all the other ways that's expected. So, not to blame everything on our parents, but I do believe that it is more difficult to erase yourself when your truest self, like your most honest, authentic, vulnerable, true self, when that is affirmed by the people in your first home environment, it's hard for you to erase yourself. But I also think that society, in addition to the way that we've all been kind of groomed to overachieve and work twice as hard to get half as much, that message, another troubling and interesting message that I think we see a lot in, communities of color, families of color, and women is this idea of humility, modesty. Don't take up too much space. Don't talk about yourself. Don't be self-promotional. That's obnoxious. And so that's one of the messages that I am always fighting against in my work, because what ends up happening when you over-index on the humility and the modesty, people don't know what you do. They don't know what you're capable of. They don't know what you're responsible for and what, you should be taking the credit for. They don't know what results that you have actually produced, so they can't promote you. They can't bring more opportunities to you. And so you take yourself out of the running for things when you fail to speak up and let folks know who you are. And then going back to that idea about like, how powerfully are we communicating? How are we owning everything and then saying that, or are we just owning a little piece of it and just sharing that? Because if we only own a little piece, we'll only get a little bit. But we have to really step into all of it if we want to attract opportunity. So all of that to say, I think the self-erasure, the culture of humility, which I also believe is by design. I believe it is by design. That's so, and curious that so many women and so many people of color have this idea of like, oh, we've got to be quiet. We've got to be humble. We can't shine too much. Now, I do know historically for Black people in America, visibility is dangerous. And even showing, like I was talking to a friend of mine who's also a psychologist, like showing how good you are would make you a target, right? If you're a target, if you're a slave who's too good, somebody might try to steal you, right? Or, hurt you because maybe you are taking resources or creating competition for them. So we have like a very, very tangled relationship with modesty and humility. But in this day and age, for us to get our just due, I believe we do have to speak up, and not, especially women and people of color. People are already clamoring to erase us and to not put us forth. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we erase ourselves before they even get a chance to potentially do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I.
No, you did. It's such a rich answer. It's such a rich answer.
I get a little heated.
I love it. That is welcome here.
On Black erasure, like when I watch, I think that's really the genesis of my work and like the professional work that I do. When you watch a film like Hidden Figures, like that just, that eats me up to see people and to know, like, you probably have people in your family, in your history. I know I do, of people who, had they been born in a different time, wow, what could they have been? Just what they knew and how naturally talented, resilient, creative, resourceful, Like my own father studied engineering in the 60s
Mm.
and ended up doing computer engineering. When he graduated college, computers weren't even invented. Like, you know what I mean? Like just
Mhm.
crazy smart folks. And it bothers me, but I also feel we miss out on so much talent.
Mm.
Because there's this whole group of people who is hidden and who has not felt comfortable or celebrated or willing to kind of to step forward, and the industries that they're working in haven't celebrated them. So just think though, if like all the
Mm.
genius that
Mm.
we've had access to had the opportunity to shine and be seen. Who knows? There's like inventions, there's all sorts of stuff. And I
Yeah,
just feel like we're missing out on.
I so agree. My utopian fantasy since I was a kid really has always been this world where everyone is empowered to share their gifts, to shine, is
Yeah.
in roles and positions and doing the things that they want to do. And that is what makes the world work well and in harmony. And I think, we keep calling out capitalism, and I think rightfully so. But the problem is when we're in the framework of a zero sum, I win, you
Exactly.
lose, you win, I lose, then there isn't this imagination of what's possible if
Right.
all of the kids had access to incredible education and then could share their genius in whatever way that manifested, right? And
Exactly.
how beautiful and amazing the world could be if everyone was given that opportunity, and that there is actually enough money, enough opportunity, enough time, right? Like there is enough to create that world if we get out of this framework of only some will have and others will not. And if others have, I won't, right? That's sort of this framework that we are operating in, and it limits us. And I think the other thought I had, and it's connected to this, is just how it can feel really easy to have limited imagination and possibilities, right? Like when you were talking about, well, just see where a creative impulse might take you, or see if you follow it. I think because we are in this frame of capitalism and it has to make money or it has to do this, we get very narrow in terms of possibility. And the reality is we don't know all of the possibilities. And so it's sort of this call to like, what if we could imagine a broader possibility that's beyond what we could imagine for this creative pursuit? And maybe it won't go anywhere, and that's okay. And maybe it will go beyond where we could even imagine. And can we allow that to be possible, both in terms of ourselves in community? Like, what is possible if fewer people, if no one is erased and everyone is seen and everyone is acknowledged? What is possible if we don't erase ourselves and we show up and we share our gifts with the world and we rest and we, and we take care of ourselves? Like, and we don't have to know the answer. We could just ask that question of like, what could be possible for my life, for the world, for my family, for community, if we operated in a different framework that's nourishing and nurturing to all of us?
Yeah. And as you were talking, you just made me think about like the idea of self-erasure again. And like, I think one of the ways that so many of us erase ourselves is just by ignoring our intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you were talking about the possibility and abundance and, you never know what will happen. One of the things that I have started experimenting with recently, because I think, a part of my work is helping people recognize when their intuition is speaking to them and giving them clues and calling them to explore, and then giving them permission or encouraging them to give themselves permission to explore whatever is coming up. And I even notice with myself, I'll get an idea, like a quick idea, like, oh, you should reach out to such and such because, and tell her y'all should have coffee or do a Zoom, or you should look up, some idea. You get these random little bits of inspiration and guidance, and they kind of just float away because you're like, oh, never mind. Or, oh, that person doesn't want to hear from me. Or, oh, such and such is too busy, or, oh, they probably already are booked, or what have you. And so I've started this practice of like writing down when I get these little nudges and just forcing myself to shoot the note off, send the email, send the text, Google whatever in the moment, or, by the end of the day, to just see what am I being guided to? What is available to me? What could potentially happen? Like, the worst thing that could happen is I hear nothing back. Right? So it's like,
yes,
why, like that, what is there to lose in that? And I can tell you, it's interesting that, like, there are so many instances when you hear from yourself, but I'm finding that the more I act, the faster I get with just like being open and moving in the direction of like my true self. And it's already, I don't want to be like, these are the things that it has yielded already, but it has yielded some cool things. Like, just people who I was like, oh, I remember meeting you years ago, and now I see you're over here. Oh my God, I would like to write for the New York Times.
That's amazing.
Do you want to talk about my work? And people saying, we should definitely connect. Like, what?
Yeah.
And that was really a little nudge that I got, like, oh, remember her? You should like send her a note.
I love it. I think even us meeting, it's like, it was the middle of a session, and I don't even totally know why I got up and walked out of the session, but it was the middle of a session. Something nudged me to be like, either I was done with the session, or I was like, whatever. But I was like, I got up and walked out in the middle of the session. So it was like, there weren't that many people in the lobby, and I was wearing a hot pink suit. And so I think you came over to be like, I think you were like, I really like your suit. And then it was like, and we're like, we've been communicating. And so it's like,
I know that name.
Little, these little things of like, wear the hot pink suit.
I thought about that. I was like, I like her suit. Should I tell her I like her suit? And I was sitting there with my friend, and my friend was on the phone. And I was like, I'm going to tell this woman I like her suit. Why not?
I love it. I had another thing like that happen. This Black woman, had these funky glasses. We were out at dinner. I was pregnant. And I was like, I love your glasses, like on our way out. And we chatted for like 2 minutes, me and my husband and her, who she was with. We had the baby, not in a way that was planned. She was the neonatologist that examined our daughter right after she was born. And she recognized me because of my glasses that she could see like beyond the surgery, because I had a C-section. But she was like, I knew it was you. And so it's like such a little, like, I had seen her glasses across the room, and we were watching. I was like, some great glasses, right? And so these little things. And it's like, could I imagine that possibility that she was a neonatologist that would examine my daughter like when she was born?
Not just a neonatologist, but your future neonatologist.
And I think that's such a beautiful, it's such a beautiful note to remember and to end on, because what it requires is slowing down and listening to ourselves and listening to what's larger and listening to our beings more than doing. Because when we are in that hustle and grind and work and we are exhausting ourselves, it is very hard to feel those nudges and listen to them and honor them. That's usually when we like get sick or something happens. And so I hope that everyone listening is inspired to imagine more possibilities for yourself, for your children, for your life, for how you can contribute to the world. And that it's a reminder that slowing down and listening is one pathway to get there.
Absolutely.
This has been such a wonderful conversation. I really enjoy it. Yes, rich. Like, I enjoy your insights and your questions. And I love conversations like this where we're bouncing off of each other. And so thank you so much. For those people who want to connect with you, want to learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
They can find me online. My website is AmandaMillerLittlejohn.com. I know that's long. but that's what it is. AmandaMillerLittlejohn.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well as Instagram. So if you just search Amanda Miller Littlejohn, I should pop up. And I would love to connect with any of you. Just let me know that you found me via this amazing podcast.
Awesome. And we will link all of those things in the show notes as well. So it's easy to get to. So thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate you sharing your time.
Absolutely. This was so much fun.